Welcome to FailCraft, the podcast where we dive into the messy, real side of success and explore how setbacks become the stepping stones to growth and clarity. I'm your host, Ezekiel Iferia, and today's guest is Katie Baker, a writer and advocate who proves it's never too late to heal. For decades, she appeared to have it all together: a successful career, a family, a high functioning life, while secretly carrying the weight of childhood trauma and addiction. But in her late 40s, she hit a rock bottom where she could no longer outrun her past. She is the author of the memoir, When the Universe Holds Your Hair Back, and she's here to share the raw truth about what happens when the mask falls off and the real healing begins. So, Katie, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thanks for showing up.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, it's great to have you here. Let's get things started, Katie. Your story resonates because so many people are high functioning while hurting. So you mentioned hitting the rock bottom in your late 40s, where a lifetime of suppressed trauma finally caught up to you. So can you take us back to that specific season of unraveling? So what did it feel like, when the fine exterior finally cracked?
Yeah, there was multiple events that sort of led up to that final
Mm,
cracking. We had a suicide in the family. I was working a lot of hours, just numbing. It was a way to numb. And I was drinking every night. So whenever I had to silence my mind, it was uncomfortable for me. So I would drink at the end of my night so I just wouldn't have to think. And when my son was 18 and I was probably 46 at the time, we were sitting by a fire pit at a family reunion, and I had been drinking all day just because that's what we do at family reunions. And needless to say, he sat down next to me in a chair and just said, "Mom, I can tell that you're really hurting, and I don't know how you survived the childhood you did, but I think you should take a year and heal yourself. We got your back." And so that sort of started this trajectory where initially, when he said that, I was actually quite embarrassed. I was like, my kids are actually seeing that I'm not holding it together because I thought I was hiding my pain really well and then no one could see it. And so that in particular was an opportunity for me to realize like something has to change. It's just no longer working. And I had never really dealt with my childhood trauma. And so for many years, I just kept going and going and going, thinking that I could run far and wide away from that trauma by just doing as much and accomplishing as much as humanly possible.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for sharing your story. So, Katie, you mentioned appearing fine on the outside. So, how exhausting was it to maintain that facade for decades? And did you feel a sense of relief when it finally crumbled?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was devastation initially. When it finally crumbled, it was devastating. It was really challenging for me because I recognized like something has to give here. This isn't working. And what appeared how it appeared on the outside is people thought, Okay, she's running a nonprofit. She's doing really well. She's engaged with the community. She volunteers at the school. She gardens. She makes dinners. Like I was kind of going through all the motions. But what I failed to recognize was that I really was sort of I call it emotionally bankrupt, where I
Mm,
just wasn't really feeling anything, I was just doing. So it felt like a robot or a zombie, and, I recognized, like, I one of the things I realized is I hadn't cried for myself for years, for as long as I could remember, and, even as a child, and so there was just a lot of awkwardness and uncomfortableness around emotions, and part of the year of healing felt really one of the reasons it was so challenging, it was like I was being plugged back into my emotions.
all right. So, Katie, you write about addiction and self-destruction. So, how did those coping mechanisms serve you in survival mode, and when did you actually realize they had turned against you?
Yeah, I don't think that they actually served me, but they
Mm.
were a way for me to hide. So it didn't really help me in the when I was in it, I felt like it was helping me in quotation marks, but it was just a way to not feel, to continue to do. And so I think that I felt like that I was seeking perfection. And I thought perfection would help me escape and run away from my childhood and not have to address it. Like the more that I did, the better I was at being a mom or a wife or a employee, whatever it was, that it would allow me the opportunity to escape. And what I recognized was it was actually the exact opposite. It was not serving me in any circumstance.
Okay, so let's talk about your book, When the Universe Holds Your Hair Back. So I think that title is so evocative. So what does that specific image represent to you in the context of, your own rock bottom? Firstly, can you, first just give us an overview of the book?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, When the Universe Holds Your Hair Back is really my memoir about healing from childhood trauma, how that childhood trauma impacted me as an adult, and the use of therapeutic psychedelics in healing from that childhood trauma. And what had happened was when I decided to use therapeutic psychedelics in particular, I was looking for a memoir, for a book out there that would kinda explain someone's journey. What does this look like? And so I was unable to really identify a memoir that spoke to me, and there wasn't very many out there, which meant at the end of this, I was meant to write one because I had understood how these medicines in particular can help someone navigate this really tough process, one that I had, just denied had even existed for most of my life, which makes it really hard when you have to go back and look at that. But so that was the book really, and I wanted to kind of write it really raw and vulnerable and open and honest and write some really hard things. And I thought, well, if people haven't experienced my lived experience, because everybody's life story is different, but maybe they could hear something or see something in my story that resonated for them. And although my path is unique to me and it's not necessarily the path of healing for everybody else, I recognize that I wanted to be honest about this experience so that people could understand what it looks like if they were curious, or what healing from that kind of childhood trauma actually looks like.
Okay, so you explore therapeutic psychedelics in your healing. So, how did that experience help you assess the hidden parts of your trauma and perhaps, that perhaps traditional methods hadn't reached?
Yeah, so I had gone to therapists for years. And what would happen was I would walk in and tell them that I'm doing okay. I wouldn't really talk about anything of substance because I just wanted to pretend like I was doing okay. And I had convinced myself I was okay. So when I decided to use therapeutic psychedelics in particular, I recognized that I've been in denial for so many years. It was like I call it encased in the amber of my history. It was like I was a fossil because I had layered protective measures just around me. So therapeutic psychedelics in particular, when you use these type of medicines, it's quite beautiful because they actually don't let you hide from what is harming you, or they kind of go, we have symptoms, let's say the drinking, but it tends to go to the root of those symptoms. Why am I drinking? What is going on? And not necessarily allow you an opportunity to hide from the things that are causing you harm. And so I think that's what's really unique about these medicines in particular, because you go deep and really go in and address the things that have kept a person stuck.
Right. So, Katie, what was the hardest part of your story to put on paper, and how did sharing it change your relationship with that shame involved?
Yeah, I gotta be honest, writing the book in particular was one of the hardest things that I've ever done. I was extremely nervous. I was known in my community as a different person than what I knew I was going to write about. In fact,
Mm.
friends of mine that have been friends for 30 plus years were like, I had no idea, not a clue that that was your life story. And so that was really interesting because vulnerable. I was open. I was honest. And also, I think that, the use of therapeutic psychedelics, in particular, I was worried, are people going to judge me? What are they going to think? It's very common, and especially in the work that I did, working with independent restaurants and bars, drinking was habitual. That's what you did. That's an acceptable drug. However, psychedelics, people have different stigmas or perceptions around these type of medicines. So, writing the book in particular was very cathartic. Writing it on paper allowed me an opportunity to process through kind of what was happening with me and also think through it. And I had journaled along over the course of that year. So I knew this is the reason I kept good notes, is because I was meant to write a book. And then also the audiobook in particular, I was dreading it because I was like, I don't want to hear my voice for 10 hours. I don't want to read this book. But I recognize that reading the book aloud allowed my story, my harm, my hurt, my, devastation growing up was allowed it to leave my muscles, my tissues. And then putting the book on social media was also nerve wracking because I didn't want people to judge me. But what I recognized was that people were far more receptive and open and willing to listen to my story than I ever thought possible. So that was cool.
All right. So for the listener right now who is high functioning, but hurting, so maybe they feel like they are too old or too far gone to change. What is the first honest step you would urge them to take today?
Well, I think for me, what worked really well was to question my stories, the stories that I told myself. I am this way, I am that way, or I always do things like this, or I can't remember this. And what I did over the course of the year was really just start questioning, hey, is that really true? Or do I just keep telling myself that's true? I also feel like, I wrote a chapter about my journey in particular. Now I'm 50, and I don't think it's ever too late to heal. The healing that happened with me in particular impacted my kids, impacted my husband, impacted my community, my friends. It changed my entire life. So I don't think it's ever too late. In fact, I don't want to now, knowing what I know, I would never have wanted to wait until, I felt it was too late or at the end of my life. And then also I wrote a chapter about my mom who's 73 as of yesterday, and how she went on a healing, psychedelic healing experience with me, and we were able to mend our relationship. And she's a new person too. And so I think that it gives me hope regardless of the age, and I don't think that that should be a limitation.
Okay, okay. So Katie, after peeling back all those layers and moving from survival to self-love, so what does being successful truly mean to you now?
Being whole, being as whole as humanly possible on any given day, which is hard enough, right? To find our way back to joy, to feel fulfillment and gratitude. I think for me in particular, it was like I felt like I was loving my family and loving myself, but I was not even close. And the year of healing really taught me about the power and importance of love of the self, grace, grace for the journey, right? I think what I've recognized and being a witness to all these different stories in terms of group ceremonies that I attended and seeing all these people heal is it's really, we underestimate what people are going through, our neighbors next door, the people in our communities. And it gave me compassion for just the hardship and the trials and tribulations and also the beauty and the love in being a human being.
Okay, great. So this has been, such a raw and important conversation, Katie. So for our listeners who want to read your books or connect with you, so where is the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so my website is peaceandfirehealing.com. That's peaceandfirehealing.com. And you can find the book on Amazon, the audiobooks on Spotify and Audible. So, yeah, I would love to hear feedback as I go through this because I think it's been impactful to hear from others as they read my story and share with me their own.
All right, Katie, was a great time having a conversation with you, and thank you very much for sharing your story on FailCraft today. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Much appreciation.